Well, hello, friends. I do hope you're having a great day today. Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Take 5 and the subject that we've been dealing with for some time now that we've simply entitled Living by Faith. Now, we're trying to wind this thing up this week, so we're doing it just a little bit different. We're going to look at the last 9 verses of Hebrews 11 and the first 3 verses of Hebrews 12. And so we don't really have a starting and stopping point each day. We're just going to go as far as we can each day and then bring it to a close, and then we'll pick back up there tomorrow. Today we're going to try to do verses 32 through 38 in chapter 11, because there the writer comes to an end of naming the great men and women of faith, and then he begins to talk about the things that their faith brought them to and brought them through, and you'll also see some things that their faith cost them. But they were so committed to their faith that they didn't let go of it. They trusted God even in the most extreme times. They trusted Him and left an example for you and me today. That's the life of faith that we should be striving for. So let's just start reading and we'll talk about this thing as we go. We'll start again at verse 32. What more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets. Now listen to what he says about them. Who through faith subdued kingdoms. But they subdued kingdoms, whole kingdoms by their faith. That's how powerful it was. That was the case with David and Joshua and many of the judges. God used them to overthrow those that set themselves in opposition to the kingdom of God and His people. And God, by their faith, would bring down entire kingdoms, were subdued and brought down through the power of faith that resided in these men. And that's available to you and me as well. So they subdued kingdoms, they worked righteousness, they obtained promises. They received promises like Abraham and Sarah's late life son, and Noah's deliverance from the worldwide flood, and Rahab's family being spared the destruction at Jericho. They stopped the mouths of lions by their faith. Well, we know Samson did that when he tore that lion with his own bare hands. David also, because he destroyed that lion with his own bare hands when he was keeping his father's sheep. But don't forget Daniel, who spent the night in a lion's den there, and God spared him by shutting the lion's mouth so that the lion didn't even have a taste for Daniel that night. And all of these men prove the power of the Creator over His creation, and all of it happens by faith. Verse 34 said they quenched the violence of fire. Well, the first people you think about, or you should think about, is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refused to worship that golden image, and this exposed them to the fiery furnace that Nebuchadnezzar had prepared for them. And when they went into that fiery furnace, they went in holding fast to faith, saying that we will not bow no matter what. If we die, we will not bow. We know our God's able to deliver us, but if He chooses not to, we will not bow. We will hold fast to our faith in God. And their faith was so powerful that they came out of that furnace, and the Bible said the smell of smoke was not even on their clothes. That's powerful faith. Now do take notice of one thing. The Bible said, the writer there said, quench the violence of fire. He didn't say quench the fire. Because faith will absolutely take you to the fire, but it will take you through the fire also and bring you out the other side. So they quenched the violence of fire by their faith. They escaped the edge of the sword. David escaped the sword of Goliath and the sword of Saul, and Mordecai and the Jews escaped the sword of Haman. All of this by faith. Out of weakness were made strong. They became valiant in battle. They turned to flight the armies of aliens God raised up, forgotten about, and insignificant and unheard of men like Gideon and Barak and Deborah and Jephthah, and made them strong and valiant and fierce because they were willing to put faith in God and trust in Him and not in themselves. Verse 35 says women received their dead raised to life. Women like the widow at Zarephath, whom Elijah raised her son from the dead. And the little lady at Shunem there who had been taking care of Elisha. He prophesied her son into existence. Then when he was born and reared and he died, he then raised him back from the dead. And there you see the power of faith, even exhibited over death. The rest of that verse went on to say that others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Tortured, not accepting deliverance. Many of these heroes of faith were tortured cruelly and inhumanely for the simple reason so that they would give up their faith in God. But they refused. They refused to give up their faith in God, and many of them paid a dear price. But they valued the promise of future resurrection. They valued it more than they did the present fear of death. Others, verse 36 said, had a trial of mockings and scourgings and chains and imprisonment. Listen now, all that other stuff, the miracles and overcoming death and quenching the fire, that's all sounds good, doesn't it? But now listen to what faith is taking them through. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were tempted. They were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute and afflicted and tormented. Abel, I guess the first martyr of Christianity, or at least of God-fearing people, Abel was killed by his own brother because he obeyed God by faith. Zechariah the prophet was stoned in the temple between the altar and the porch because the people wanted to create their own image of God. Isaiah was killed by King Manasseh, who stuffed his body up into a hollow tree and then sawed him in half lengthwise. Yet these men would not relinquish their faith. And the Bible said in verse 38, of these men the world was not worthy. Wow. These men and women were greatly flawed, but their faith was greater than their flaws, and this made the world around them unworthy of the life they lived and the sacrifices that they made. And that same faith can be alive in you and me today. Now, all of a sudden now, we're looking at it probably from a different perspective, unsure if we really want that, but let me go ahead and tell you, you want that. Faith is worth it. If it costs you everything, it's worth it to serve God to that extreme. God so esteems the life of these heroes of faith that He says the wicked world doesn't even deserve their example of living faith. That's how much God values a man or a woman that will put complete faith in Him and hold fast to that faith and defend it until the very end. Well, hey, I've got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Wednesday's edition of Take 5. Until then, God bless you. Have a great day. Hold on to faith, my friend. It will not fail you, and neither will your God.